public rental karting tracks, you'll typically find that sessions come in two flavours. The first being the casual session, where you'll find yourself on track with some people who are just here for a laugh, to be honest. They'll get in your way on a hot lap, they're not great at leaving space sometimes, but ultimately they're not there to try and set the fastest lap of the year, they're there for a good time. The second type of session is the members session, who are the complete opposite of this. Highly competitive, deeply familiar with the track layout, and absolutely ruthless when it comes to racing. But what happens if these two groups collide? Well, you get this.
Oh my goodness gracious, that was bad.
We were here today to usher 2026 right, with a spot of karting at TeamSport Liverpool, because I'm a fan of this track's simple yet fun layout and the model of karts they use. At least when the boost works properly anyway. Our first session was a breeze. We were mixed in with a couple casual drivers, but ultimately it wasn't really a problem. Then, some more experienced drivers showed up. So, let's find out what happens when public sessions become complete chaos. I immediately kick off this session by accidentally rear-ending my girlfriend at some speed because I was too stupid to pay attention to the lights test.
Sorry, what? Oh!
Then as we get going again, we approach an absolute chalk and cheese pack of drivers, one of whom decided to try and ram into the apex to get through it, and one who then presses my girlfriend directly into the barrier while taking the corner, which is not something she took lightly, to be honest. Then one of them clips the lad in the black helmet, who in turn inadvertently blocks another member because he's been spun out, and if the goal was to spin other drivers out, that would have been worth a hell of a lot of points. In the process of trying to slow down for the flag, he pitches himself into another spin somehow. Yep, this is going about as well as you'd expect, really. And after a couple more minutes of tomfoolery, we're actually able to do a little bit of racing. As we come to this corner, Alyssa makes a decisive move towards the inside, and I kind of get blocked off because this guy had to react to her move. She is now a credible threat, and I genuinely have to try to really keep up with her. As I try and close the distance on her here, yet another red flag comes out because the corner we were just at is the corner where someone's decided they would rather park their kart. Yeah, it's gonna be one of those sessions, I think. At this stage, Alyssa has been seriously keeping me on my toes, and I've been having to really pull out everything I can in order to keep up with her. However, our karts have a slight disparity, and that is the boost. Liverpool struggles with these karts because the fact that they're such a pain in the arse to work on that the boosts often don't work half the time, and it meant that I was able to close up the gap on the main straight and set up what could have been a very interesting move and a drag to the next corner, until we get a red flag and someone spins themselves out trying to respond to it again. Then a member pulls up. And remember this one, because this member is going to get himself into a rather interesting incident in a minute, as you probably already saw, actually. Alyssa gets the jump on me when the flag goes from red to yellow because she's very keen on that and she very much keeps her eye out for those sort of things. Then things go green again and we start chasing after the person who just spun out in front of us. Alyssa starts trying to look for a move on the inside, sees that that's not going to work, and then decides to brake early into this corner to get a lovely move down the inside. However, because my kart has the better boost, I'm able to overtake the both of them, unfortunately, and then I set my sights on kart 31 up ahead, who manages to leave me just enough space for me to slip on the inside of this corner, and honestly, that was a nice little bit of racing. Hopefully, people will keep their noses out the barriers for 5 minutes so we can actually enjoy ourselves for a second here. And keep their noses out of barriers they did, long enough for me to develop NPC brain and almost accidentally close this guy directly into the barriers while setting myself up for this corner. He was a gentleman though, so he immediately forgave me when I offered the apology. However, things are about to get rather interesting, because this was the moment he overtakes the guy on the outside here, starts sailing down this down ramp, someone drops it at the bottom, and...
Oh my goodness gracious, that was bad.
Now, I'm a couple lumens of brightness short of a flashlight, so I'm not exactly going to dissect who was at fault there, but that clearly happened because this guy tried to go on the inside of this guy while he was spun out, and he decided to try and recover himself while 3 karts were sailing down the ramp towards him. Little bit of a confusion going on there, but ultimately everybody is okay. This guy seems to have cemented in his mind who exactly is at fault, and everything continues as normal, with nobody severely injured, fortunately. A little later on, me and Alyssa finally get the little battle that we wanted, because once again, I throw it to the inside down this corner here, and she comes side by side with me as we go up the ramp. Now, I'm boosting up the ramp and trying to save boost when I'm on this straight. However, Alyssa is doing the opposite, which means I actually do have to expend just a little bit of boost in order to stay ahead. I hold the center of the track to make sure she doesn't try a counter move through this corner, which she figured out immediately and does a hell of a lot better than I do, but I knew as soon as I got on this straight, I would be able to leave her in the dust because of our unfortunate disparity issues here. However, it was still fun to be able to make that move, and it is fun to be able to have these battles. We've now caught up to the back of the majority of the traffic again, which means we're going to need to do a little bit of careful traffic navigation here. As I get the move done on this guy around the outside here, I'm careful about this guy in front of me. However, because he loses his back end, I lose mine in sympathy as well, and that allows this member in the black helmet to overtake both of us on the main straight. He locks me out coming into this corner, but I'm thinking I could try for a counter move at some point until the flag goes red. This guy spins himself out in response to it, and the member just disappears up the ramp anyway, because apparently he didn't see the lights either. To be fair, neither did I, so I can't really blame him. Behind me, Alyssa decides she wants to be a good Samaritan and decides to try and pitch this person facing the right way again, but in their miscommunication, she just accidentally makes the problem slightly worse, which means they are in a slight T-bone position here, so the marshal's now going to rescue the cart in front of her, and we should be able to continue from there. We're on the second session now, and just after this lights check, two members find themselves directly on the inside of me and take that opportunity directly out of my hands. Which means I actually have the chance to showcase the fact that these guys actually can race, and we had a fantastic little chase going on with these two. And the first step I need to do is stop messing up that first corner going up the up ramp, because Jesus Christ, I made that mistake every single time this session. Every single corner where it was even remotely hairpin, the back would step out and I would just lose so much ground. But because I had this sneaking suspicion that my kart had a bit more boost than these guys again, especially the fella in the white helmet, because he's going way slower than he should be at the moment, that was how I was kind of keeping with these guys. I cut to the inside to make this move happen right here. However, I leave him plenty of space on the outside, almost press him into the barrier, but make sure he's got just enough breathing room. I use a little bit of boost to stay ahead. However, he's just hanging it around the outside at the moment, but I just managed to close him out here. Now I need to chase after this guy in the white helmet in front of me, who's taking the corners a lot better. However, I have the benefit of more boost in this car because this fleet's parity leaves a lot to be desired. Liverpool, I love you guys, but you really got to get this thing sorted. I go way too wide on this corner here, which means it's not going to be this lap which I catch up with him. You can see that he's getting the perfect brake kick entry into the corner. However, because that cart's just got no boost whatsoever, I'm managing to stay keen even though I'm just making mistake after mistake after rotten mistake. Slowing him down is another one of the back markers up ahead. However, he manages to find a slight gap through there, kind of taking this other person off their line, which means like the River Nile, it opens up for me. However, that slowed him down tremendously here, which means I've now come bumper to bumper with him. I start looking to the inside here, that's not going to happen, so I brake, switch to the inside for this corner, manage to get the overtake done through here, leaving him plenty of space. He accidentally nudges the back of me, but because we got this red light, it means he pulls alongside and gives me a little bit of respect. See, that's the fun that we can actually have when people know what they're doing. Remarkably though, session 2 actually was really calm. Honestly, I think what happened was all of the chaos from the first session meant that everyone just kind of spent their time getting acclimated to the karts, and by the second session they went out there with a little bit more confidence and a bit more of an idea about how these karts work. Now, I was using the majority of this session experimenting with the boost, because previously the way I would use the boost on this track was I would boost after I'd gotten up the ramp, because my line of thinking was I weigh about 60 kilograms when I'm not kitted and about 65 when I am, so I don't actually need the boost to help me get up this ramp as quickly as I need to, and then I can just, as soon as I'm up the ramp, just get up to full speed again. However, this was the complete incorrect strategy, and what I was actually supposed to be doing was boosting as soon as I was hitting the apex, and then sending it up the ramp, and I wouldn't need to boost going along that main straight, because of course I'm boosting coming down this down ramp, and that's where the majority of the time is being made up. And then doing that, it meant that I even had some spare boost to use coming down the start-finish straight, and it meant that I was able to put in some incredibly quick laps this session. However, it was the third session where I was setting the fastest ones, but I was just kind of enjoying this one. It was relatively free of incident, which means I actually might not need this incident counter for a little while, but we'll keep it there because it looks nice to have something on the screen for a little bit. We rounded out a surprisingly civil session 2, and we readied ourselves for our third and final session, in which I'm hoping that we continue with this trend and not the "oh god, am I gonna break all of my limbs trying to get past people" trend.
Oh, sorry.
We kicked off session 3 with a lovely little battle between me and my girlfriend here, as we have to navigate through at least one person in order to make this continue. However, we both wait patiently as we come around this corner. Alyssa gets a much better exit though, because she's a lot better at this corner than I am. At this stage, we have much more equal cards, but because we're bumper to bumper, I hazard an early boost and a quick dive to the inside, which sets me up for this corner right here, where I go wide on the exit, she cuts to my inside, and I start blasting boost in order to try and stay ahead. Completely not realizing there was a yellow flag in the process. However, I stayed ahead because, well, I was ahead when the yellow flag came out, so I think she will forgive me for that one. A little bit later on, I managed to mirror the exact same move on this individual right here after a yellow flag restart, and even though it doesn't look that interesting, it's definitely one of my favorite ways to overtake on this track, because it does feel a little bit daring. At this point, I notice that I've got Alyssa right behind me vying for my position, and because our karts don't have a massive parity between them this time, it means I'm actually having to work to keep her behind me. So this should be interesting. This person gets a quite slow exit out of that corner. I think they actually hit the barrier, which means I'm able to just blast on past in this corner here, locking them out and making sure to leave just enough space that I don't put them into another barrier, because no one likes being there. However, in the process, we passed this individual who's managed to put their cards into the barrier nose first, which means I kept that incident counter up there for a good reason. Alyssa kept me keen throughout this entire session, as you can probably see, ever so slightly there. She's still on my own side, which means I have to give her a wide berth as I'm coming through this sequence of corners here. However, because I am firmly ahead coming to this corner, it means that I'm completely able to lock her out and absolutely sail down this straight using the old boost technique. I overtake her around this person around the outside, which feels rather precarious in the moment, but ultimately it was completely manageable. I boost down this down ramp in order to try and keep the gap from Alyssa behind me. This individual just kind of washes wide, nice and slowly, in order to let me past. Alyssa is still giving chase though, so I need to make sure that I am absolutely focused in order to not lose this little duel we're having. At this stage, I got a little bit too comfortable and completely forgot that Alyssa was very much on pace with me and very much vying for an overtake, as she very nearly throws it down the inside of the first corner. However, I just managed to lock her out in the process, which meant that I just managed to avoid that fate for the time being. There are still two people in front of me, though, that I need to pass very cautiously in order to not give her an in, which means I almost rear-end Kart 49 trying to maintain my speed. However, I just managed to cut to the inside here, getting to this awkward chicane corner that I can never seem to get right. We start trailing behind kart number 28 here, and as I begin my approach, I start formulating a move while trying to make sure that I can keep Alyssa behind me. A slight hiccup happens with this yellow flag that comes out, but then it goes quickly green again, which means I start trying to get my move done. However, 28 held their ground quite well, boosting up that ramp quite quickly and actually being quite difficult to catch up to for the time being. However, coming out of this corner, they either neglected to boost or I just got a better exit, which meant I was able to sail through the inside right here. Then I set my sights on the next kart in front of me, hoping that I can maybe make this pass a little bit less eventful than every other pass that's happened this session so far. I begin sailing down the main straight, holding a center line in order to try and keep Alyssa behind me. Then I find the slightest little gap going through towards this corner here, which genuinely felt great and looks great. It's a shame it's only against regular people, but well, you know, it still looks cool. I want to finish off this session by showing off this cool little lane split I did as I boosted up the up ramp to try and keep up with kart number 50, 58 here. It's really difficult to read those numbers, especially when they're smudged with chalk like that. No, that's not even chalk. What am I talking about right now? I completely fluffed up the commentary about how I just overtook two people because I was too focused on the numbers on the backs of the kart. A little bit off cuff, but whatever, it's what I did. I absolutely messed up the corner exit, just like I just messed up all of my commentary. But you know what? For the sake of chaos, I'm going to keep that in as well. You know what? It just feeds into the video's energy at this stage. With the members absent from this session, meaning that the chalk and cheese dynamic of casuals versus members was not present, we had a much more relaxing session 3, which meant the people on track with us were a lot slower. However, it meant that they weren't really clashing with a bunch of members who knew what they were doing. I do like racing with members, and I don't mind racing against casuals, but when the two mix, it creates some explosive results, as we saw in this video. But we've now pulled into the pits, and now I'm going to explain why exactly this video was so bloody late. And that concludes our time at TeamSport Liverpool. For now, at least. We will be revisiting this track a lot sooner than you'd think. Now, yes, I did promise weekly uploads, and for 3 weeks, I did manage to keep that going. So, what stopped me this time? Well, I have a very good excuse for that, and that question can be answered in the next video, in which I tried to defeat Warrington again. And... until next time.